What is the worst thing you saw as a child that you wish you could unsee? I hit a little girl while riding a bicycle. I was maybe 11, going full speed down a sleepy residential street. She ran out from between two cars, and her head was right at handlebar height. I had bare metal handle grips, and I didn't even crash. She lived for 9 days. My parents were going to watch a movie in their room, but they wouldn't let me watch it with them because it was rated R, and I was too young. The movie they brought back from Blockbuster was a mistard. They had rented one for them, and one for me. The one they rented for me was called Warriors of Virtue. After they tucked me in goodnight, I snuck out of my room and waited for the right moment while they were brushing their teeth so I could sneak past them and hide out in their closet. It would be my first R-rated movie. I cracked the closet door open just enough so I could see the TV in the side of the room where my parents' bed was. They finished brushing their teeth. My dad came out and walked over to the bed and took off his shirt and his underwear and crawled in bed naked. I had seen my dad naked before, so it didn't bother me. My mom came out and went over to the VCR. She popped in the video. It was showtime. Then she walked over to the bed and did the same thing my dad did. She took off the robe she had on. She was naked from head to toe. I tried to avert my eyes. The movie came on. The screen lit up the dark room, and I heard my dad say, "This is gonna be good." Then my mom said, "Turn on the fan. It's gonna get hot in here." The TV made a noise, and then all of a sudden the bodies of two porn stars came on, and they were all oiled up. There was no mistard. Not that I saw, but I heard. My parents had just gotten a divorce and my dad moved out to some dingy downtown alley duplex with no interior doors, not too unlike a studio. I was visiting and slept in the back area near the kitchen. It was late at night and very quiet. I was just with my thoughts trying to sleep when I hear muffled bawling. It was my dad trying to be as quiet as can be. My heart was crushed. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day was just fine though, or seemed to be. 10 plus years later it still hurts to think about. I was 6 or 7. I had a brand new kitten, a runt I was going to raise to be big and strong like the other cats. One day I couldn't find him and stepped outside just in time to see my dad's truck tire roll backwards over his head. I didn't have time to stop him. It was like a balloon popping and remains my most vivid memory of that time. I walked in on my dad raping my older brother when I was 4. I didn't understand what was happening. He was already molesting me, but he didn't do what I saw him doing to my brother until I was a little older. For some reason seeing what he did to my brother has haunted me and hurt me for years. A pile of dead pigs at the tree line between the woods we were mushroom hunting in and a hog farm. The hog farm illegally dumped the dead pigs in the woods out of sight. The pigs had been there a few days. They were bloated and the smell, my god, there is nothing like the smell of rotting flesh. There were thousands of flies, maybe 15 or so hogs, maybe 20. They were just piled up. Green slime was coming out of one that had been pulled into the woods a bit near the stream. I was freaking out. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. I was upset about the dead animals, and my dad hands me a stick and says, "I dare you to go poke one." Thanks, Dad. Lifelong process. 25 now, but watching my mother fully succumb to mental illness. I've witnessed her fall step by step from the most loving, caring woman you could ever meet to a very disturbed and chaotic shell of herself. When I was young and thought of crazy, I thought of straitjackets and padded white walls. Never did I think that those who were ill were ones like you and I. I never considered the process. Mental illness, in my experience, is a small weed amongst a beautiful garden of roses. It's hidden at first. There's too much good to notice anything bad. The bright colors, the smells, the butterflies and birds. All the vibrant life that surrounds the garden. It starts by wrapping around the weakest rose, taking its water, its light, draining all of its energy as it gains its own strength. Slowly but surely, one rose by one, that beautiful garden changes. Not in the way the autumn leaves magnificently display their colors as they give way to winter. Rather, that tiny vine that you never noticed before becomes a vicious, suffocating, relentless weed that provides no room for light and new growth. It takes everything that ever was pure and replaces it with an emptiness that promises no return. The reds, yellows, and pink shades all fade to grey. Then the petals themselves go deep into the soil. All that is left is a bare hollow piece of ground that supports no life. To the passerby, they would never believe how beautiful that garden once was. As much as I try, I don't remember what those roses smell like anymore. Love you, Ma. I was watching my dad and his best friend remove some trees from a lot near our house. One of the trees fell between a forked tree and teeter-tottered up then back down on top of my dad's friend. An ambulance came and took him to the hospital, where he died that night. Seeing my big tough dad collapse to the floor in overwhelming sadness was as traumatizing as witnessing the event itself. When I was 8, I was staying at my grandparents' house. I had to use the bathroom, and the door was open, so I figured nobody was in there. Somebody was in there. It was my fat grandpa. He was butt naked, and in a desperate attempt to hide his shame, covered his moobs with one arm, and placed his other hand over his danglies. He literally looked like Venus in the Birth of Venus painting. As if that wasn't enough mental scarring, it happened again the following day. Thanks, Grandpa. I went to Bible camp when I was 8. I woke up early in the morning because I had to pee, and I saw one of the camp counselors with a broken hand, who had to sleep in the cabin with the kids, masturbating. I laid there watching him masturbate for 20 minutes, captivated by what he was doing. I didn't know what he was doing. I was 8. I thought he had a mosquito bite on his leg or something. He finished and then pet the camp's cat. That poor cat. P.S. Mr. Counselor, if you are reading this, I think you made me gay. Thank you. When I was a kid, my neighbor moved away and left his elderly dad alone to have the house to himself, but that old dude couldn't take care of himself at all. Thus neighbor paid me $20 every week if I mowed the lawn and checked on old dude. For a 12-year-old, that was glorious coin. Anyway, every week I'd mow the yard, knock on the door, make sure he wasn't dead, collect my money, go home. One week I knock and nobody answers. I thought, fuck, I'm about to see an old dead guy. I open the door, call his name a few times, nothing. It was when I investigated an envelope full of license plates that I heard movement. The bathroom door creaked open and this fat potwrinkly naked old dude comes shuffling out. Aside from him being a naked old fat guy, which would be horrifying enough, through a thatch of ancient pubes a tiny sparrow egg cock was sputtering piss onto the wooden floor. In addition to that, he had clearly gotten up from taking a fiery dump, as he had brown shit water all over his legs and gooey feces mushed into the hair on his legs and ass. The smell was overpowering. I went outside to retch as he shouted at me about not touching my license plates. He came out onto the front porch and continued to jab a gnarled finger at me, each of his eyes pointing in opposite directions. The Price is Right intro theme playing in the background at an incredibly unreasonable volume as the pungent smell of his sickly defecation stained my brain cells. Bonus story: after another week of mowing his fucking yard, I checked on old dude again. Assured he was fully clothed, I came inside when invited, and he informed me he had a favor to ask me. He wanted me to go down into the basement. Bracing myself for potentially having to clock this weirdo and booking, I headed into the dank, single light basement from the exterior cellar door. With a crooked finger he gestured to a pile of shit in the corner that needed to be put into garbage bags. Most of the shit in question was old paint cans, long since expired chemical cleaning agents, bleach, etc etc. Ran home, grabbed glove/mask, and proceeded to bag all the rusted out cans and dripping bottles of age-old filth. Now what? I asked him as I hauled these heavy bags into the driveway. In that truck, he wheezed, indicating his primeval black Shidmobile. This truck was from the early 80s, probably ran on some combination of diesel/child blood, and emitted a noxious black smoke. After some hesitation I carefully placed the garbage bags holding the equivalent of Captain Planet's kryptonite into the truck bed, hoping faintly that would be that, and I could go home and play Star Fox. Wrong. Old dude grumbled something about getting in. Hopping onto the funky smelling passenger seat was one of the worst decisions of my young life. He hadn't had his driver's license for a solid decade, and probably hadn't driven in as many years. I know this because he didn't stop at any lights or signs, never signaled, and was going a solid 20 miles per hour over the speed limit on busy streets. I prayed to get pulled over. Multiple times I thought I was going to die as we veered through busy intersections, angry drivers screeching and honking their horns, shouting profanities. I was crying manly 12-year-old tears by the time we finally got out of town. Then another thought came to mind. He's taking me out to the country. Is he going to kill me? Are those chemicals in the back intended to dissolve my remains? Old dude was a manic twitchy fucker. Anything was possible. When he pulled over, I was grateful to see a farmhouse about 150 yards away. We had stopped near a drainage ditch on some farmer's property. He told me to grab the bags and throw them in the ditch. I was young, terrified, and knew of no way to get back to town, so I threw the reeking corruption into that poor bastard's drainage ditch. I was probably responsible for the extinction of some rare bird or something. Anyway, old dude got a huge laugh out of this. He might have known the farmer for all I knew. I survived the 90s equivalent of Mr. Bones while dried back through town and ran home, clutched my SNES, and refused to do house checks for him again. As far as I know, his son finally moved him into a dumpy apartment where he lived out the rest of his days being a weird old fuck. When I was little, I watched my grandfather collapse and die of a heart attack the day before my little brother's first birthday. It just so happened he decided to give him his birthday gift a day early too. He watched him play with it for a while, left and didn't make it across the street. I was 5, but can still remember it like it was yesterday. When I was 17, my friends and I were cutting through a park just after dusk. We heard muffled screams somewhere in the forest which bordered the edge of the park. We went to investigate and went into stealth mode, because in this park teens often fucked off the beaten path, but normally during the day. When we got closer to the screams, we realized it was the screams of a little girl. We broke into a sprint and saw a big log in the distance. The screams were coming from the other side of that log and we jumped over it to find a 33-year-old man sodomizing an 8-year-old girl. Not just attempting, but full on succeeding. We proceeded to kick the shit out of him until he wasn't moving anymore and carried the terrified girl out to safety. I can't get the screams of the girl and the image of the guy raping her out of my head. I often wonder to myself, had I run faster could I have saved her innocence? Turns out that he had intended to kill her and leave her there, so there's that. Best part of the story, we almost got punished for assault. I grew up in a really small town, literally 96 people. Everybody knew each other. When I was about 7, me and my father were driving up to the store to get some food when we found my dad's friend's truck parked in the middle of the highway. We stopped to see what was up and found him and his wife limp in the front seat. There was something gooey and red dripping down from her hair. My dad told me they were sleeping and we drove into town and found the sheriff. My dad told the sheriff that Brandy and Kay were passed out in the middle of the highway. I didn't realize until I was much older that my dad wasn't just trying to protect me, but was actually in denial about the whole thing. He didn't stick around or anything. We just went on with our day. When we came back through town, my dad was flagged down and called to the crime scene. I saw them pull Kay out of the car and her body limp on the ground with red and blue flashing against it in the car. Brandy had shot Kay in the head with a .22 and then killed himself. To this day I take the long way home to avoid that spot on the highway. When I was in elementary school I would have vivid flashback when our bus drove past it. Oh god, I just remembered another one. Why do I have 2 answers in this thread? Why? So you know how mommy cats cart their kittens around from place to place. One of my cats came running into my house from the backyard gate holding her baby in her mouth and jumped up and hid in the storage space above my bathroom. A while later I can hear her screaming. So I get the ladder out and go check up on her. She keeps nudging her kitten and wailing, so I crawl into the space to get a closer look. Turns out she had clamped a bit too hard, judging by the tooth-shaped hole in the kitten's neck, and the poor tiny little thing was dead. We figured she was running to get away from one of the many dogs that also live around my house, and was careless in her haste. None of the other kittens from that litter had survived the birth. This was the last one. It was so utterly heartbreaking to watch her grieve over her poor baby. Went to the Amazonian exhibit at the Smithsonian Zoo when I was little. Leaned against a wall because I was tired. Turned to see a bunch of huge red spiders with gnashing mouths galloping towards my hand. Arachnophobic ever since. My parents always watching unsolved mysteries running into America's Most Wanted probably has something to do with how neurotic and paranoid I am. Falling asleep to tales of alien abductions and serial rapists does things to a person. When I was a child, approximately 4½ my neighbor murdered his wife and son with a shotgun before killing himself. In the days after, the lapped officers had my mother go into the house with them to identify/sign for some property. She was alone watching me, and for some reason her and the officer thought it would be okay for me to go into the house with her. I can clearly remember the murder scene. There was smeared blood in the hallways, up where the walls met the ceiling. It looked like someone had thrown grape jelly, and it was just stuck up there in certain places. I can still smell the blood when I think about it. It's a wet metallic smell, like when you gut a fish. Needless to say, I didn't eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for about 20 years after that, and I still don't care for anything with peanut butter, even now. I'm 40, blood and gore don't bother me. I'm indifferent to death, and it takes a lot for something to bother me, but I often wish I had never been exposed to that at such a young age.